The city was quiet, the dim streetlights casting long shadows on the damp pavement. Alex stood in front of his new apartment building, taking in a breath of the cool night air. His heart raced slightly. New beginnings always did that to him. He had spent weeks searching for the right place, and this apartment, tucked in a quiet part of town, was supposed to be perfect. Small, modest, yet comfortable. The last thing he expected, however, was to encounter the woman who would change everything. The building was older, its stone exterior worn but sturdy. A faded, "For rent," sign hung by the door, barely noticeable under the fog creeping in from the nearby river. As Alex reached for the door handle, the door creaked open unexpectedly. A tall woman stepped into the frame, her long black hair catching the dim light, eyes sharp and observant as she scanned him. "Mr. Carter?" she asked, her voice smooth but laced with something Alex couldn't quite place. Authority, perhaps. "I'm Lyra, the landlord. You're here about the apartment?" Yeah," Alex stammered, surprised by her sudden appearance. I was just—" "Come in," she interrupted, stepping aside. Her tone was firm but not unfriendly. "I'll show you around. I'm sure you'll like it." Alex followed her inside, feeling like he had entered another world. The interior of the building was nothing like he expected. There was a modern, almost futuristic edge to the decor. It didn't match the old stonework outside, sleek metallic surfaces, soft, ambient lighting, and a faint hum that seemed to come from the walls themselves. He couldn't help but feel like he was stepping into something unfamiliar, something otherworldly. Lyra led him through a narrow hallway and opened a door to a modest apartment. It was spacious, but not extravagant. It was the kind of place someone could live in for years, where life would feel lived in, not just temporary. "I'll be up front," she said, turning toward him. "The apartment is available, but there's one thing you should know. My daughter will be staying here as well. It's part of the arrangement." Alex blinked in confusion. "Your daughter?" "Yes," Lyra confirmed, her gaze unwavering. "She's different. But I trust you'll understand soon enough." A sudden, inexplicable tension filled the air. Alex felt an odd chill sweep through him, his curiosity piqued, but he didn't press her further. After all, this was her home, her rules. He didn't want to be rude, and it was just a room. "So, when would I be moving in?" he asked, trying to push the awkwardness away. "You can stay tonight if you'd like," she replied, walking to a small table by the door. She reached into her bag and pulled out a set of keys, handing them to him. "The place is yours. But there is something you should know about my daughter. She doesn't always understand Earth customs. But she means no harm." Alex took the keys, his fingers brushing hers for a second too long. A strange warmth spread up his arm, and he quickly pulled his hand back. "All right, that's fine." "Good," Lyra said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "She's upstairs. I suggest you rest for the night. Tomorrow, she'll want to introduce herself properly." Before Alex could say another word, Lyra turned and left, leaving him standing alone in the apartment. The sound of her footsteps faded as she disappeared up the stairs. Alex stared at the door, still processing what had just happened. He hadn't expected any of this. A daughter? Who was she? And why had Lyra been so cryptic about her? He didn't know why, but something about Lyra, her poise, her voice, the way she carried herself, left him unsettled. He shook his head, trying to focus. "It's just an apartment," he muttered to himself. "You're overthinking it, Alex." But the odd feeling remained, gnawing at the back of his mind. As he turned toward the window, the view of the quiet street outside only seemed to amplify the strangeness of it all. The hum in the walls, the eerie quiet, and now this strange woman and her daughter, none of it made sense. But then again, maybe he wasn't meant to understand yet. A few minutes later, Alex decided to head upstairs and introduce himself to Lyra's daughter, hoping that might help clear up the mystery. He had just reached the first step when the sound of footsteps stopped him. Turning, he saw Lyra's daughter standing at the top of the stairs, her long hair cascading down her back. She was barefoot, wearing something too elegant for the setting, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made him feel small. "I'm Zara," she said softly, her voice carrying an alien rhythm. "And you are the one my mother spoke of." Alex swallowed hard, feeling the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Yeah? I'm Alex." She smiled, a subtle, knowing curve of her lips. "I'll be staying with you. I hope that's acceptable." Alex nodded, trying to force a smile, but inside, he could feel his pulse quicken. This wasn't just an apartment anymore. Something had shifted, and he didn't know whether to be excited or terrified. "Sure," he managed, his voice trembling slightly. "It's fine." Zara stepped closer, her presence overwhelming yet oddly comforting. "Good," she said, the corners of her mouth lifting slightly. "You'll see soon enough why." As she turned and walked past him, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just taken a strange, irreversible turn. And the story was just beginning. The day passed quietly in the apartment, with the hum of the city just outside and the ever-present hum within the walls of the building. Alex couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, and it wasn't just the odd chill in the air whenever Zara was near. There was something about her, the way she moved, the way she looked at him. It was as if she was measuring him, trying to figure out whether he was worth the risk of the secret she was so clearly hiding. That evening, as the sky turned from soft pinks and oranges to deep purple, Alex stood by the kitchen window, looking out over the quiet city streets. The apartment felt both too big and too small for him now. Too many corners where shadows seemed to linger just a little too long. The quiet was oppressive, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. He heard a faint sound behind him, soft footsteps, almost imperceptible. He turned, but there was no one there. Then, the faint scent of jasmine and something else, something earthy, almost metallic, wafted through the air. "Zara," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She appeared in the doorway, standing there with a presence that felt almost unnatural. She wore a simple yet elegant white dress that seemed to shimmer slightly, like it was catching light that wasn't even there. Her eyes, dark and unblinking, met his with an intensity that made his heart race. "You're still here," Alex said, trying to sound casual, though his voice betrayed him. Zara didn't respond immediately, her gaze drifting to the view outside the window, her expression unreadable. She took a step forward, her movements smooth and purposeful. "I've been watching you," she said, her voice low and deliberate. "I wanted to understand you before I reveal too much." Alex swallowed. "Understand me? How?" Zara's lips quirked upward in what could almost be called a smile. "You're different from the others. You don't run away when faced with something you don't understand." She paused, her eyes locking onto his with a curious intensity. "But I need to know why." Alex took a step back, uncertain how to respond. The air between them crackled with tension, the unsaid words hanging heavy. "Why?" he repeated, trying to keep his voice steady. "Why does any of this matter? Why are you here? What is your mother hiding?" Zara's expression shifted then, something dark flickering across her features. "My mother has kept me hidden for a reason. You're not ready to know everything, Alex. But I can't keep pretending." She stepped closer, her presence overwhelming as she reached out to touch his arm, sending a jolt of energy coursing through him. Alex blinked, the warmth of her touch lingering even after she pulled her hand away. He felt disoriented, like something inside him had shifted, as though the world had tilted just slightly. What did you just do?" he asked, his voice betraying a hint of fear. Zara's gaze softened, her hand falling to her side. "I didn't mean to frighten you. It's just, I need to make sure you're ready. You've already stepped into something bigger than you realize." Alex shook his head, trying to make sense of it all. "I'm not sure I want to be ready for whatever this is," he muttered. Zara's eyes darkened, and for a moment, there was a flicker of something that almost looked like pain. "You don't have a choice. I'm here because I need help. The people after me are closing in, and they won't stop until they have me, or until I'm dead." Her words struck Alex like a physical blow, leaving him stunned. "Who's after you?" he asked, barely able to get the question out. Zara stepped back, her shoulders tensing as if preparing for something. "Not who." "What?" "They're not human." She paused, a conflicted expression crossing her face. "I'm not human." The revelation hit Alex like a punch to the gut. He had suspected something was off, but hearing it in plain words made the weight of the situation hit him all at once. "You're not human?" Alex repeated, his voice shaky. "What does that even mean? What are you?" Zara closed her eyes for a brief moment, the expression on her face one of exhaustion, as if the burden of what she was about to say was too much. "I'm the last of my kind," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My people were destroyed, hunted to extinction. My mother saved me, hid me here. But I can't stay hidden forever. And I can't do this alone." The room seemed to close in around Alex. His thoughts were spinning as he tried to process the information, but all he could think of was Zara, her eyes, her touch, the way she seemed to vibrate with something not of this world. She wasn't lying. There was too much conviction in her voice, too much truth in the way she spoke. He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, the soft hum from earlier, always in the background, grew louder, and there was a flash of bright light from the corner of the room. The walls seemed to pulse, and Zara froze, her eyes wide, filled with an emotion Alex couldn't read. "They've found us," Zara said urgently, her voice trembling. "You need to trust me, Alex. You need to come with me now. Before it's too late." The floor beneath Alex's feet felt unstable, as if the ground itself was shifting. He couldn't decide what to do. His instincts screamed at him to run, but his body was already moving toward her. The pull was undeniable. "Come with me," Zara repeated, taking his hand in hers. This time, when she touched him, there was no jolt of energy, just a sense of urgency and desperation. "I'll explain everything. But we have to go. Now." As the sound of footsteps echoed from the hall, Alex realized that whatever was about to come next would change everything. He had no choice but to follow Zara into the unknown. The apartment was cold. Not in the way a place could feel chilly at night, but in the way it seemed to absorb warmth, as if the walls themselves were holding back something, a secret that Alex had just begun to understand. He stood in the middle of the living room, Zara's hand still gripping his, the sensation of her touch like a lingering spark on his skin. He could hear the low hum, the energy in the air, thick with a sense of urgency. The lights flickered for a moment, casting strange shadows across the room, making everything seem both familiar and alien at once. "They're getting closer," Zara whispered, her voice strained but steady. "We don't have much time." Her words hit him like a wave, pulling him back to the present. He was supposed to be getting answers. He had questions, so many questions. Yet, here they were, racing against an unknown threat that had found them, no doubt because of him. He hadn't been prepared for this. "You said they're not human," Alex said, his voice rough with the uncertainty he was trying to suppress. "Who are they? Why are they after you?" Zara's eyes flashed with something intense, anger, fear, or maybe both. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't speak right away. Instead, she tugged him toward the far corner of the room, where an old wooden cabinet stood. She moved with a purpose, like she knew exactly what she needed to do next. "I can't explain everything," she said, her voice softer now. "Not yet. But you need to trust me. These people, they're part of a group that's been hunting my kind for centuries. They believe I'm the key to something they want, something dangerous. My mother kept me hidden because she knew what they would do if they found out I survived." Alex watched her, the weight of her words settling heavily over him. His mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle. But every time he thought he had a grasp on it, something new emerged, something that forced him to question everything he thought he knew. He noticed the way her fingers trembled as she unlocked the cabinet with a small, glowing device that seemed far too advanced for anything he had ever seen. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the floor beneath them, like the room itself was alive with anticipation. "You're not telling me everything," Alex said, unable to stop himself. What is it that's so dangerous about you? What's this key you keep talking about? Zara froze for a moment, her face a mask of conflict. She opened the cabinet, revealing a strange, metallic device, pulsing softly with an eerie glow. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, nothing from Earth, he was certain of that. The device seemed to hum in response to her touch, almost as if it recognized her presence. I am the key, she finally said, her voice trembling now. This device, it's connected to me. My people created it, a last-ditch effort to save us. But it was never supposed to be used. If they get it, if they use it, everything will change. Her words hung in the air, a heavy silence following them. Alex's mind raced. What could she mean by that? What could this device possibly do that was so catastrophic? I don't understand, Alex admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. You're telling me you're the last of your kind, and this device, it's tied to you? Zara nodded, her gaze never leaving the object in her hands. It is. And if the wrong people get their hands on it, they'll use it to destroy everything. My people, your world, nothing will be safe. The weight of her words settled in, and for a moment, Alex could only stare at her, struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what she was saying. He'd known there was something different about her, something beyond the strange allure that pulled him in every time she was near. But this was beyond anything he could have prepared for. He was in deep now. Deeper than he'd ever imagined. The faint sound of footsteps outside the apartment door sent a chill racing up his spine. They were here. The people after her, after them. Zara's expression hardened, and she stepped toward him, her eyes filled with determination. We have to go. Now. They'll be here any second. Go? Alex repeated, the reality of the situation sinking in. Where? What do you want me to do? Zara's gaze softened, just for a moment. I don't want you involved in this. But if you stay, if you want to help me, you need to make a choice. Her words hung in the air, but Alex knew she was giving him an out. She didn't want to pull him into this, he could feel that. Yet, despite the fear gnawing at him, despite the overwhelming uncertainty, he couldn't walk away. I'm not leaving, he said, his voice firm. Not now. Her eyes softened for just a moment, a brief flicker of something that might have been relief, but it was gone before Alex could register it. Without another word, Zara turned to the device, her fingers flying over it with a fluidity that suggested familiarity. The glow intensified, casting eerie light across the room. It's time, she murmured, almost to herself. Let's go. Suddenly, the door burst open, and a group of dark figures flooded into the room. Alex barely had time to react before Zara yanked him behind the cabinet, her grip tight on his wrist. The world seemed to stop for a moment. Everything slowed as Zara activated the device, and a pulse of light shot from it, blinding and powerful. The figures froze, their faces obscured by dark helmets, but Alex could feel their presence, cold, calculating. Zara's eyes met his for a split second before she whispered, Hold on. The air around them shifted, warping, bending, and then everything went white. The pulse of light was blinding, a searing brightness that filled every inch of the room and then some, making Alex feel like his very soul was being unraveled. He blinked, but his vision didn't return. It was as if the world had paused, suspended in a moment that stretched forever. In the midst of the glowing haze, Zara's grip on his wrist tightened, the only tether to reality in the disorienting storm of light. Her breath was steady, despite the chaos. She was unshaken. Her strength had become his anchor, and he didn't want to let go. Then, just as suddenly as the light had appeared, it vanished. Alex blinked rapidly, trying to adjust. The room was gone. The walls, the faint hum, the cool apartment, they were all gone. In their place was something far stranger. They stood now in a vast, open space, stretching out in every direction. The ground beneath their feet was soft, but firm, like the surface of a dream. Above, a sky stretched in impossible hues of deep violet and orange, a swirling mass of colors that had no earthly equivalent. The air was heavy with the scent of something foreign, earthy, metallic, but also something floral, like jasmine and wild rain. Alex swallowed hard, his heart hammering in his chest. Where are we? His voice cracked, his mind struggling to keep up with the reality of what was happening. Zara didn't answer right away. She turned her face to the sky, her eyes wide, as if taking in the beauty of the place, or perhaps assessing some unseen danger. The movement made her dress shimmer, the fabric rippling like it had a life of its own. We're safe for now, Zara said finally, her voice cool but laced with something Alex couldn't quite place. This is a sanctuary of sorts. A place I can hide, for a while. The words didn't sink in at first. A sanctuary? From what? The dark figures? The ones hunting her? Alex's mind was still reeling from the light, from the sudden shift in reality. He tried to gather his thoughts, but nothing made sense. He took a step forward, and the ground beneath him shifted slightly, as though it were alive. It wasn't jarring, but it made him hesitate. His eyes darted to Zara, who had already taken several steps ahead, her pace confident, purposeful. He followed her instinctively, a strange pull that he couldn't explain, like gravity itself was urging him toward her. Are they still after you? He asked, his voice tight with the tension that refused to leave his body. Zara glanced over her shoulder at him, a shadow crossing her face. Yes, she answered simply, the weight of it hanging in the air between them. But not for long. He wanted to ask more, to demand the truth from her. What was the device? What did she mean by my people? But the words wouldn't come. He couldn't tear his eyes away from her, not after what had just happened, not after the trust she'd placed in him by bringing him here. Why me? The question slipped from his lips before he could stop it. Why did you bring me here? What do I have to do with this? Zara stopped walking, turning to face him. Her eyes locked onto his, and in them, Alex saw something raw, something that made his pulse quicken. She seemed so fragile in that moment, vulnerable in a way that didn't match the fierce strength she'd shown before. You're here because you chose to stay, she said softly, taking a step closer to him. And because you're the only one who can help me. Alex felt the air around them shift, the weight of her words sinking into his chest. He hadn't realized how much he wanted to help her until that moment, how much he wanted to be the one to stand by her side, to protect her. You didn't have to drag me into this, he said, his voice rough, but the words felt like an admission. I could have walked away. I could have left you, left all of this behind. Zara's lips parted, her gaze searching his. But you didn't, she replied, her voice steady, but the slight tremor in her hands betrayed her. And now you're in it. All of it. There's no turning back. A gust of wind blew through the strange, ethereal landscape, carrying the scent of jasmine with it. It was both calming and unsettling. Everything in this place felt alive, but not in any way Alex understood. The sky seemed to watch them, a vast, unblinking eye that held secrets beyond comprehension. He wondered if Zara knew what was coming next, or if she was as lost as he was. You said I'm the only one who can help, Alex pressed, trying to focus on something concrete. Help with what? Zara's expression hardened, and for a brief moment, her vulnerability was replaced with something else. Something darker. The people who are hunting me, they aren't just looking for me. They want the device I carry, the one that binds me to this place. They believe it holds the power to unlock something. Something dangerous. Her words made his stomach twist. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, and he felt himself standing at the edge of something far greater than he had ever imagined. Why don't you just destroy it? Alex asked, the question leaving his lips before he could stop it. Zara shook her head slowly, her eyes clouded with sorrow. Because I can't. It's part of me. And if I destroy it, I destroy myself. The silence stretched between them, thick with the gravity of her confession. It was as if everything had changed in that instant. The weight of what she was carrying was now his, too. Then what do we do now? Alex asked, the uncertainty in his voice tempered by a new resolve. Zara looked at him for a long moment, her gaze intense. Now we fight. The words hung in the air, and Alex felt something stir deep inside him. He had chosen to stay, to be a part of this, and now there was no turning back. Whatever they were about to face, he would face it with her. But as the skies shifted above them, and the wind carried with it the faintest trace of danger, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning.